The lemon cleaner bite filled the conference room as the will reading started, and my husband Noah quietly took his mother's chair, leaving mine empty. Still, I traced my wedding ring once, pretending I hadn't noticed the thin folder he kept tucked under his palm. As that citrus air sharpened, Mr. Hale opened my father's sealed packet, and Cynthia's smile froze like she'd seen a ghost. While the same sterile scent clung to my throat, Noah's fingers twitched toward the papers as if he already owned them. The same lemon sting burned deeper when Mr. Hale read 3 names under coercion attempts, and Noah's was one of them. That's when I made my verdict. I said nothing and let the truth pull their masks off line by line. Before we start, I'd love to hear where you're watching from. If you enjoy the story, please hit like, subscribe, and join our community. It really helps us grow. Cynthia's house always smelled like roasted herbs and money, rosemary chicken in the oven, a thick vanilla candle burning like it was trying to erase the fact that anyone ever argued inside those walls. The dining room looked staged, gleaming table, matching napkins, glasses lined up like trophies. I'd changed outfits twice before we came, not because I was vain, because I'd learned there was no right version of me in that room, only versions they could critique. The moment I stepped in, Cynthia's eyes flicked over my dress like she was appraising fabric at a store. Her smile widened. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, voice bright and sweet. "That dress is lovely." Relief flashed through me. Quick, embarrassing. Then she tilted her head, lowering her voice just enough to feel intimate. "You always know how to look. Well-funded." Paige snorted into her wine, the kind of laugh she tried to hide but didn't really want to. The sound made my face burn. I forced my mouth into a polite smile, the kind I'd perfected over years of swallowing small humiliations. Under the table, Noah's hand found mine. He squeezed once, firm, not comfort, control. The message was clear. Be quiet, don't react, don't embarrass us. Richard started talking before we'd even finished the first bite. His voice filled the room the way his presence always did. "So," he said, leaning back like a king at his own table, "what do you contribute around here besides vibes?" Paige's eyes brightened like she'd been waiting for that line. I set my fork down carefully, the silverware making a tiny clink that sounded too loud. "I work," I said, steady. "I manage operations for a clinic, scheduling, vendor contracts." Richard waved his hand like he was brushing crumbs off a table. "That's cute. Real money is family money, legacy, that's what counts." Noah stared at his plate like it had suddenly become fascinating. He didn't say my name. He didn't say, "That's not fair." He didn't even look up. Silence, offered like a gift I was supposed to be grateful for. Cynthia steered the conversation to vacations and good circles and the places they planned to go next. Paige chimed in, tossing in little lines about earning your place, like marriage was some kind of internship and I was still on probation. Every time I opened my mouth, the moment slid right past me like my words couldn't find a place to land. Then Cynthia glanced at my plate and smiled again, soft, effortless. "Would you mind taking these to the kitchen, dear?" Of course, always the dishes. Not Noah, not Paige. Me, like it was a natural law. In the kitchen, the faucet hissed and the water ran hot, steam rising in my face. Lemon soap burned my fingertips. Through the doorway, I could hear them laughing, Richard's booming laugh, Paige's sharp giggle, like I was background noise in my own life. On the drive home, streetlights streaked across the windshield. My hands were clenched in my lap so tightly my nails left half moons in my skin. "That hurt," I said finally. "What your mom said, what your dad said." Noah sighed without looking at me. "They're old-fashioned." "That's not old-fashioned," I whispered. "That's disrespect." "Don't make it a thing," he said, tone flat. "Just don't." At home, he went to bed like nothing had happened. The room was dark, the sheets cool. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling cheap in a way that had nothing to do with money. Then my phone vibrated on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a name that snapped my heart awake. The hospital. I sat up fast, reaching for it, breath-catching. Noah didn't even open his eyes. He mumbled, irritated, "Tell them to call back." Like my emergency was a bad timing issue. I froze with the phone glowing in my hand, listening to it buzz again, and something inside me went very still. The hospital air felt like it scraped the back of my throat. Bleach, stale coffee, and that cold metal smell that made everything feel clinical and final. The hallway lights were too bright, humming faintly above me as my shoes squeaked on the waxed floor. When I turned into my father's wing, I stopped short. Noah was already there, with Cynthia and Richard standing way too close to my father's doctor, like they were closing a deal. Richard's shoulders filled the space. Cynthia angled her body toward the doctor with that polished, practiced smile, nodding as if she belonged in the conversation. Noah leaned in, attentive, hands in his pockets, like this was a meeting he'd scheduled. Then Cynthia saw me and her expression tightened, sweet on the surface and sharp underneath. She stepped in, her perfume floating over the antiseptic air, and she touched my arm like we were close. "Try not to upset him," she whispered near my ear. "Stress is bad for assets." Assets. The word made my stomach turn. My father wasn't a file. He wasn't a number. I opened my mouth to speak to the doctor, but Noah shifted, subtly, smoothly, so he stood between us. "We've been talking," Noah said, smiling at the doctor. "I can handle the details." A nurse approached with a tablet. "We need to confirm," Noah answered before she finished. "Whatever keeps him comfortable. Minimal stress." The nurse's eyes flicked to me, a question there, and I felt my face heat. I hated how quickly I was becoming invisible. I forced my voice out anyway. "I'm his daughter. I want to be included." Noah's hand pressed lightly at my back, guiding me forward like I was being managed. "Of course," he said, the tone calm, the message not. Inside the room, the sound of the monitor was steady, too steady, like it didn't understand what it was measuring. My father's breathing was thin and ragged, like paper tearing slowly. I took his hand and it felt lighter than it should have, bones too close to the skin. I leaned in. "Hi, Dad," I whispered, and my throat tightened on the words. Behind me, I heard Richard's low murmur. "State planning." "If things turn," Cynthia replied softly, "we just want it handled." I turned, anger flashing hot. "Can you not talk about that right now?" Richard's brows lifted like I'd interrupted something important. "We're just being practical." Paige, half by the window with her phone, smirked. "She doesn't like money talk." Visiting hours ended. A nurse gently told us it was time. I held my father's hand until the last second, then followed them out into the hallway, heart pounding, ears ringing. And that's when I saw Noah, quick and careful, slip a folded document into his jacket pocket. The edge flashed a stamped name, my father's law firm. The funeral home smelled like lilies fighting disinfectant. The air was cold and over-conditioned, the kind that made my skin tight and my eyes sting, even before the tears came. Soft piano music played from somewhere I couldn't see, looping the same gentle notes like grief was supposed to be tidy. I stood near my father's casket with my hands clasped so hard my fingers ached. My black dress scratched at my side seam, and I kept smoothing it down like I could iron my life flat. My father's photo sat on an easel, him smiling in sunlight, so alive it felt cruel. Cynthia approached with her arms open, face already arranged into sympathy. Her perfume hit first, powdery and expensive, completely wrong for this room. She hugged me for exactly 2 seconds. I knew because my body started to lean into it on the third, and she was already pulling away. There, she murmured, patting my back twice. Then she turned, bright smile snapping into place as more people entered. "Oh, Marjorie, thank you so much for coming." She moved toward donors and neighbors like she was hosting an event, not standing beside her daughter-in-law who was barely holding herself together. Paige slid in next, glossy-eyed but not from crying. She squeezed my arm and said, "At least you'll be okay. loud enough that two women behind her paused and looked straight at my left hand, my ring. Their eyes sat on it like it was evidence. Paige's mouth twitched with satisfaction, like she'd tossed a match into dry grass. I swallowed hard and nodded because my throat didn't feel big enough for words. Noah kept intercepting people before they reached me. "This is my mom, Cynthia, and my dad, Richard," he'd say, warm and charming. Then, like an afterthought, "And this is my wife." Not my name. Not, "She just lost her father." Just my wife. An accessory he wasn't sure he wanted to claim. Near the guestbook table, I heard Richard's voice behind me, low and pleased. "He married up," he murmured. Cynthia's laugh followed, soft and airy. Or he married a shovel. A shovel. My stomach twisted so hard I had to grip the edge of the table. My face went hot, then cold. I stared at the chained pen, the messy signatures, and felt fire rise in my chest with nowhere safe to go. I found Noah in the hallway where the light was dimmer. "Did you hear what your mom said?" I asked, voice tight. He barely looked up. "They're grieving," he replied, as if grief explained cruelty. Then he leaned in and lowered his voice. "Just be gracious. People are watching." That night, the house was too quiet, filled with leftover food and silence. Noah set his phone face down on the dresser with a small, deliberate thud and said casually, "Mom thinks we should meet your dad's lawyer together." And I realized they weren't waiting for me to heal. They were waiting for me to sign. Noah slid the paper across the kitchen counter like it was nothing, like it was a grocery list, not something that could change my life. The overhead light buzzed, too bright against the gray morning, and the house still smelled faintly of the casseroles people had dropped off after the funeral. Comfort food turned sour. "It's just a family document," he said, tapping the top page, "to streamline things." My eyes went straight to the bottom. The signature line was already highlighted in yellow. My throat tightened. I pulled the pages closer, the paper scraping softly on the granite. "What am I signing?" Noah leaned back, casual, like my questions were background noise. "Just authorization so my parents can help, so you don't have to deal with all the lawyer stuff." "I want to read it," I said, flipping the first page. The paragraphs were dense, full of legal language that made my skin prickle. Authorization, representative, access. Noah smiled like I was being difficult. "Babe, don't spiral. My parents are trying to help." Spiral. The word landed like a slap disguised as concern. I stared at the yellow highlight again, bright and impatient, like it was yelling at me to comply. "I'm not spiraling," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "I'm not signing something I don't understand." His expression tightened for half a second, then smoothed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said quietly. "I'm trying to protect you." Protect me from my own decisions. The next morning, Cynthia called, her voice syrup-sweet. "We'll support you, dear," she said. "We just want what's best." I stood at the sink, water running, staring at a mug I hadn't washed. Then she added, light as a joke, "Just don't get greedy. Grief makes people ugly." My fingers clenched around the ceramic until it bit my palm. "I'm not greedy," I whispered. "Oh, of course not," she cooed. "I'm just saying, people talk." When the call ended, the kitchen felt smaller. The family document sat on the counter like a trap, the yellow line glowing. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Hale's office. "I need a private appointment," I said. There was a pause, then the receptionist lowered her voice. "Yes, Mr. Hale requested you come alone." Requested. My stomach dropped. My father had planned for something I hadn't even admitted yet.
Noah found out and didn't explode. He punished quietly. At the pharmacy later, under harsh fluorescence, my card declined twice. The machine beeped, and the cashier's smile stiffened while people shifted behind me. I called Noah from the car. My card declined. He sighed like I was the problem. "That's weird. Maybe you're not budgeting right." By the time I sat in Mr. Hale's office, leather chair, faint smell of paper and cologne, my hands wouldn't stop trembling. He slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "Your father left strict instructions," he said. "For your eyes first." The seal tore with a sharp sound in the quiet, and my breath caught as I pulled out the letter. The letter felt heavier than it should have, thick paper in my shaking hands. Mr. Hale's office was too quiet. Soft lamps, leather chairs, the faint smell of old files and coffee gone cold. Even my breathing sounded loud, like I didn't belong in a room where people made decisions instead of feelings. I unfolded my father's letter and expected comfort. Instead, the first line hit me like a hand on my chest. "They will pressure you. They will pretend it's family. Do not sign anything without counsel." My throat tightened. I read it again, slower, like the words might soften if I gave them time. They didn't. My father's voice came through the page, steady and urgent, like he was still trying to protect me even now. Mr. Hale waited until I looked up. His eyes held mine. Calm, precise, the way people look when they're about to say something that changes everything. "Your father amended his estate plan recently," he said, "not because he changed his mind about you, because of concerning requests." My stomach turned cold. "Requests from who?" He opened a file and slid a call log across the desk. Dates, times, notes in clean handwriting. Cynthia. Cynthia again. Richard. Again and again. Calls clustered around my father's decline. Next to several entries, one word repeated. Access. "What does that mean?" I asked, voice small. "It means they asked how things were structured," Mr. Hale said. "Whether anything could be transferred. Whether you could delegate authority." Delegate. Like my father's legacy was a chore I might hand off. He slid another page forward. "And Noah contacted our office as well." My chest tightened. "Noah?" "Requested forms for his wife," Mr. Hale said carefully, "without you present." A hot wave of humiliation rose in my face. I could hear Noah's voice in my head. "Babe, don't spiral," like my questions were proof I couldn't be trusted with my own life. Mr. Hale hesitated, then added, "There's more. During your father's illness, Noah attempted to file a petition to be named financial representative in the event of incapacity." The room tilted. I stared at the edge of the desk, the wood grain suddenly too sharp, too real. "He tried to do that? Without telling me?" "Yes," Mr. Hale said. "Nothing was granted, but the attempt was made." My mind flashed to the hospital hallway. Noah stepping in front of me, answering for me, slipping a folded document into his jacket. The highlighted signature line on my counter. Cynthia whispering, "Assets." Mr. Hale's voice stayed steady. "Immediate steps, no signatures, separate counsel, and a formal record of coercion attempts. Your father anticipated a fight." When I walked out into the cold air, my phone buzzed. Noah's text lit the screen. "Mom says you're meeting lawyers behind my back. Don't embarrass us." I stared at it until my hands stopped trembling, not because I calmed down, but because something else took over. Now I understand. The war had already started. Cynthia's dining room smelled like cinnamon and control. 2 candles burned on the sideboard, some expensive winter orchard scent that tried to sweeten the air, but underneath it I could still smell roasted meat, dish soap, and that faint floral perfume Cynthia wore like a badge. The table was set with heavy plates and cloth napkins folded into perfect triangles, forks lined up like a lesson. Everything in her house looked like it was waiting to be judged. I sat where she placed me, not where I wanted. Noah sat to my right, close enough that his knee pressed against mine under the table. A quiet reminder to behave. My hand stayed in my lap, fingers twisting the edge of my napkin until it wrinkled. I could feel Paige's eyes on me the way you can feel a camera even before it comes out. Sharp, curious, hungry. Dinner was almost normal at first, the way a storm is almost normal right before it breaks. Cynthia asked about my week in that syrupy tone that wasn't really a question. Richard talked about the neighborhood, property taxes, the direction the town was going, like he was always in charge of the weather and the economy. Noah nodded at the right moments, smiling when he needed to. Then Cynthia brought out dessert. Warm apple tart and vanilla ice cream, steam rising where cinnamon met melted sugar. It was the kind of dessert meant to soothe, meant to make you think. See? We're taking care of you. She set the plate in front of me with a gentle smile like she was offering kindness. I made your favorite, she said, and for half a second I almost believed she remembered me as a person. Then she rested her hand on the back of my chair and leaned in, voice soft, intimate, performatively loving. Your father would want you to keep the family together. My fork froze. The words hit me like a tug on a leash. She used my father's name like a tool, like something she could hold up to force obedience. My throat tightened, and suddenly the tart smelled too sweet, the candle smoke too thick. Across the table, Richard leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, comfortable as if this was his meeting. So, he asked, casual, what did the lawyer say? Not, how are you surviving? Not, do you need anything? Just, what did the lawyer say? Like my grief was a business update. I'm not discussing it, I said carefully. Noah's hand slid onto my thigh under the table, squeezing once. It looked affectionate from a distance. I knew better. His fingers pressed in a way that said, don't. Smile. Don't embarrass us. He leaned slightly toward me, and his eyes did the talking. Smile. Cynthia's smile widened. We're just trying to protect you from making emotional decisions, she said. Emotional decisions. Like I was unstable. Like the only responsible thing was to hand my life over to people who had never respected me. Paige lifted her phone, bright and innocent. Wait, this is cute, she chirped. A little family moment. The tiny glint of the camera lens caught the chandelier light. I felt my face burn as she angled it. Noah looking calm, Cynthia looking caring, Richard looking wise. And me? Sitting stiff, jaw tight, eyes tired. I could already picture the caption later. Look how she acts after everything we do for her. I said I'm not discussing the will before the official reading, I repeated, firmer. Cynthia's smile didn't fall. It sharpened. Her voice stayed sweet, but the words came out like a blade. Secrets look like greed. The table went still. Even the candles seemed louder. Noah's hand tightened on my thigh, pressure rising. Richard's mouth twitched like he was amused. Paige lowered her phone just enough to watch my reaction, waiting for me to break. I breathed in slowly, vanilla, cinnamon, perfume, and forced myself not to give them what they wanted. I'm grieving, I said, and my voice surprised me with its steadiness. That isn't greed. That's boundaries. Noah's knee bumped mine, hard. A warning. I need air, I said, pushing my chair back carefully so it didn't scrape. No one offered to walk me out. They just watched me leave like I was being dramatic. Outside, cold night air hit my face. The driveway lights made Cynthia's show house glow perfect and spotless. My keys rattled in my shaking hand as I opened the car. Noah followed, sliding into the driver's seat and shutting the door with a controlled thud. He didn't start the car. He stared through the windshield for a beat, then leaned toward me, voice low, calm, almost gentle. If you make my mom look bad, he whispered, you'll regret it. My stomach dropped, because I heard the threat hiding inside his calm. The house sounded different when Noah wasn't in it. No TV murmuring, no heavy footsteps, no cabinet doors closing with that sharp little impatience he carried. Just the refrigerator hum and the tick of the hallway clock, steady as a metronome. I stood in the kitchen staring at the counter where he'd slid that streamlined document toward me days earlier. I could still see the yellow highlighted signature line in my head, bright and impatient. Protect you, he'd said. Don't spiral. My stomach twisted. I wasn't proud of what I did next, but something in me had changed. I stopped asking permission to feel suspicious. I went to the small office nook off our living room, Noah's territory. The desk was always neat, the way people keep things neat when they don't want you digging. I opened the top drawer, pens, rubber bands, a stack of sticky notes. The second drawer had old warranties, an expired passport, and thick tax binders lined up like bricks. I slid the binders aside. Dust puffed up and caught the light from the blinds. Behind them, tucked so neatly it looked intentional, was a manila folder. Estate, written in thick black marker. My fingers went cold around the edge. For a second I just stared at it, hearing my father's warning in my head. Do not sign anything without counsel. Layered with Noah's calm voice. Babe, don't make it a thing. I pulled the folder out. Inside, the papers were organized in a way that made my skin crawl. Not messy, not accidental. Prepared. The first page was a draft email addressed to Mr. Hale's office. I recognized the firm's name at the top, the clean professional formatting. What I didn't recognize was the sender line. My name. The email started politely, almost sweetly, like me on my most obedient day. Hi, Mr. Hale. Thank you for your help during this difficult time. I'd like to authorize my husband, Noah, to communicate on my behalf regarding estate matters. My throat tightened. I read it again, slower, hoping I'd misread. But the sentences kept going, asking what forms were needed, requesting expedited processing, using words I never used. Expedited, delegation, authorization. It sounded like me wearing someone else's hands. I flipped to the next page. Another draft, slightly different, same voice. Then another. And then I saw the printouts. My signature. Cropped from old forms, scanned, resized. Multiple versions on plain paper like templates. Some had faint gray outlines, like someone had traced the curves. My stomach dropped so hard I had to grip the desk. A new kind of humiliation spread through me, hot, dizzying. This wasn't just disrespect. This wasn't just my husband staying quiet while his family mocked me. This was impersonation. My marriage wasn't a partnership. It was a plan. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Every email draft, every signature page, the folder label. The camera click sounded too loud in the quiet house, like evidence being born. I scrolled to the contact Mr. Hale had recommended, Nina Brooks, attorney. My thumb hovered, then pressed. She answered in a calm, clipped voice. Nina Brooks. I think my husband is trying to access my father's estate through me, I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. There was a pause, then, Are you safe right now? Yes, he's at work. Good, she said. Do not confront him. He will try to make you look irrational. He'll use grief as a weapon. My throat tightened. So what do I do? You document, she said. Screenshots, call logs, copies, dates. Back everything up somewhere he can't reach. And you sign nothing. Not one thing. That night, Noah came home acting normal. He kissed my forehead like a good husband. His cologne filled the hallway, and it made my stomach flip now instead of soften. After dinner, he leaned in with that gentle voice he used when he wanted me compliant. You're not mad at my mom, right? He asked sweetly. I'm just tired, I said. His phone buzzed on the counter, lighting up the dim kitchen. I saw the name before he flipped it over. Cynthia. And the message in all caps. Make sure she signs. Noah covered the screen fast, chuckling like it was nothing. But I didn't laugh. I stood there gripping the counter, feeling the last pieces of denial fall away, quietly, completely, into a paper trail they didn't know I was already saving. Evan Park's office didn't look like the kind of place where marriages died. It was quiet and clean, gray carpet, a small desk lamp casting a soft circle of light, the faint smell of toner and black coffee. No warm decor, no inspirational quotes. Just a second monitor, a calculator, and stacks of folders lined up like he trusted paper more than people. I sat across from him with my hands wrapped around a paper cup of water. The condensation made my fingers slip. My throat felt tight, like even saying the truth out loud could make it real. "I've been called a gold digger for years," I started, "by my husband's family. And now, they're pressuring me to sign things, streamline documents, authorizations. They keep saying they're protecting me, but it feels like they're trying to get access to my dad's estate." Evan didn't react the way most people did. No pity, no outrage, just a single nod, like I'd given him a problem and he was already sorting it into categories. "Okay," he said calmly. "I need bank statements, yours and your husband's, credit reports if you can get them, any debt records, and tell me if you've noticed sudden spending shifts, new accounts, unusual withdrawals, large purchases, anything that changed around your father's illness." The lack of emotion should have felt cold. Instead, it felt like oxygen. Like for the first time, someone wasn't asking me to be gracious. Someone was asking me to be precise. I showed him the photos I'd taken of the estate folder, drafted emails written as if they were from me, and those signature printouts that still made my stomach flip. Evan scanned the screen, eyes moving fast. "Good," he said. "Dates matter. We build a timeline. Timeline. Proof." Words that didn't care about Cynthia's smile or Noah's tone. Nina worked in parallel, filing requests through legal channels with the calm patience of someone who knew the system would force truth out of anyone who tried to hide behind charm. A few days later, an envelope arrived at my house. Thick, stiff, stuffed with pages that smelled like fresh ink and bureaucracy. I opened it at the kitchen table under the buzzing overhead light. The same counter where Noah had tried to slide that highlighted signature line under my hand. My fingers trembled as I flipped through. Then my stomach dropped. There were balances and credit lines I'd never seen, not small ones, tens of thousands in debt, then more. My eyes jumped to a section of recent activity, cash withdrawals in neat amounts, pulled in tight clusters like someone feeding a secret fire.
I stared until the numbers stopped feeling like numbers and started feeling like motive. All those jokes about me being well-funded. All those little comments about earning your place. All those glances at my ring like it was evidence. The humiliation didn't disappear. It changed shape. It turned into rage. They weren't calling me a gold digger because they believed it. They were calling me that to distract from the fact that they were digging. Evan called that evening, voice steady, timeline driven. "I flagged some items," he said. "There are recurring payments to a private membership club, high monthly dues, and there's a consulting line, regular charges that don't match your husband's job role." "Consulting?" I repeated, the word sour on my tongue. "That's how it's labeled," Evan said, "but it doesn't behave like legitimate professional services. And the timing," he paused, "it ramps up right around your father's decline." My grip tightened on the phone until my knuckles hurt. In the other room, the TV glowed blue, muted. The quiet in the house felt loud again. So while my dad was... I couldn't finish. My throat locked. Evan didn't fill the silence with comfort. He filled it with clarity. "People under financial pressure do predictable things," he said. "They manufacture urgency. They push signatures. They look for access." The next morning, Noah was almost cheerful. Too cheerful. He buttered toast like we were planning a normal day. "Mom wants us to come tonight," he said. "Small prayer gathering, just family and a few friends." "A prayer gathering," I repeated, because it sounded like a stage. Noah smiled too hard. "It'll be good for you," he said, "and it'll show everyone we're united." United. Another word that really meant obedient. So I went. Cynthia's house was warm and flattering, lights turned low, air heavy with cinnamon and simmering food. People stood in clusters holding mugs, voices soft, faces sympathetic in that curated community way. Cynthia found me immediately, took both my hands, and squeezed with cool, firm fingers. "After the will reading," she murmured, smiling like she loved me, "we'll finally know who you really are." Her eyes glittered with certainty, and in that moment I realized she thought this room would crown her. The conference room at Hale and Winters smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper, the kind of sterile clean that didn't comfort anyone. Bright recessed lights washed everything flat. The long table looked too polished, and the chairs were stiff, like comfort wasn't allowed where people came to fight over what was left behind. Mr. Hale stood at the head of the table with a thin folder and a legal pad, calm and precise. I sat with my hands folded so tightly my nails pressed into my skin. Across from me, Cynthia sat poised with perfect posture, pearl earrings catching the light. Richard lounged like it was his board meeting. Paige sat angled toward me, smirking like I'd already been sentenced. Noah didn't sit beside me. He sat beside Cynthia, his hand resting on the back of her chair like he belonged to her more than he belonged to me. He didn't touch my arm. He didn't look at my face. Mr. Hale cleared his throat. "This is the formal reading of the last will and testament of—" He said my father's full name, and my chest tightened as if the room had less air. Richard chuckled. "Maybe I'll retire early," he joked, grinning like this was a payout. Paige's smirk deepened. Cynthia's smile stayed soft and controlled. Mr. Hale opened the will, paper sliding with a crisp sound that made my stomach turn. He read through the standard language, debts, final expenses, administration. Then his voice reached the line that changed everything. "The remainder of the estate shall be transferred into a protected trust," he read, naming the trust with my father's name attached, official and permanent, for the sole benefit of my daughter. My breath caught. My daughter shall serve as the sole trustee. Sole trustee. A door locking. Mr. Hale continued, steady as stone. "No spouse of my daughter shall have access to the trust assets or distributions without my daughter's written authorization." Silence dropped hard. Cynthia's smile froze in place. Richard's mouth tightened, and Noah's eyes finally flicked to me, sharp, unfamiliar, like he was seeing me not as his wife, but as an obstacle. Mr. Hale reached for a second sealed packet. "Your father left supplemental instructions," he said, breaking the seal with a neat motion. "In the event of coercion or attempted manipulation by any named individual," he listed names: Cynthia, Richard, Noah. My pulse pounded in my throat. "Any legal contest," Mr. Hale read, "will trigger a no contest penalty. Any portion sought by those individuals will be redirected to the charitable foundation established in my name." Paige's smirk thinned. Richard's face reddened. Noah went pale. Mr. Hale lifted one final attachment. "A transcript of voicemail messages left at my office," he said, and began reading. "She's emotional," he read, in Cynthia's own words. "We can get her to sign." The room cracked open. Cynthia's chair scraped back with a harsh screech. "That's taken out of context," she hissed, sweetness gone, eyes blazing. Noah stared at the table like he wanted to disappear, and I understood with cold clarity. Their next move wouldn't be polite. The hallway outside Mr. Hale's conference room felt colder than the room itself. My ears still rang with Cynthia's hiss, out of context, like volume could rewrite evidence. The fluorescent lights made everyone look pale and tired, even the people who came in polished. I didn't even reach my car before my phone started vibrating in my hand. One message, then two, then a flood. "How could you do this?" "You stole the family's future. This isn't what your father wanted. You're tearing everyone apart." Names I barely knew, cousins, in-laws, people who never checked on me when my dad was alive, suddenly had opinions. Each buzz felt like a tiny slap. I could picture Cynthia already on the phone, voice trembling just enough to sound wounded, telling relatives I'd taken something that belonged to all of us. By the time I slid into the passenger seat, Noah was already rigid behind the wheel. The car smelled like his cologne and warm leather, a scent that used to mean home and now made my stomach churn. He didn't start the engine right away. He turned toward me, jaw tight. "You're embarrassing us," he said. I stared at him. Us? He spoke like he was explaining something simple to someone slow. My mom is getting calls. People are asking questions. You made a scene. A scene? My voice came out thin. Your mother's voicemail was read aloud. Noah's eyes flashed, then smoothed. He reached into his bag and pulled out a thin packet of paper, crisp and ready, like he'd been waiting. Sign this, he said, sliding it toward me. A postnuptial. Just to prove you're not greedy. The words landed like ice in my stomach. Prove. Not greedy. Like loyalty could be notarized. Like the only way to be good was to give them access. I didn't touch it. No. His mouth tightened. So you're really going to become exactly what they said you were. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. Hard, repeated. I opened the door and Richard filled the frame, face red, voice booming into my entryway. You manipulator, he barked. You think you can steal from this family? Across the street, a curtain shifted. A neighbor stared through blinds like my pain was entertainment. Richard leaned forward, pointing. People know what you are. And Paige made sure they did. Within an hour, she posted a vague story. Black background, white text. Funny how some women marry for money and call it love. No name, but everyone understood. The next day at the grocery store, a woman I barely knew looked at my ring like it was proof. That's when Nina stepped in. She filed for a protective order against harassment and sent a formal notice. All communication through counsel. The paperwork arrived clean and official, and for the first time I watched Noah realize he couldn't talk over paper. That night, he sat in the dim bedside light and said quietly, "If you don't share, I'll contest the will." My hands trembled, but Nina's warning rang in my head like steel. I met his eyes. Go ahead. The notice arrived on a Tuesday in a stiff envelope that felt heavier than paper should. I opened it at the kitchen counter under the buzzing overhead light, using a butter knife because my hands were shaking too much to tear it cleanly. Petition to contest will. The words blurred, then snapped into focus like the universe wanted me to feel every syllable. Noah had filed it anyway. My stomach dropped, not from surprise, but from the accusation printed in cold legal language. Undue influence. As if loving my father, sitting at his bedside, holding his thin hand while he fought for breath, had been a scheme. As if grief was fraud. Heat crawled up my neck. My throat tightened like it was trying to swallow a stone. I didn't call Noah. I called Nina. Her voice was calm, steady. Send me photos of every page, she said. Don't respond directly. And don't panic. Within hours, she moved like a machine, built for this. She filed our response and attached the no contest clause language my father had drafted with surgical precision. Then she attached the evidence packet, clean, labeled, impossible to sweet talk. The pressure text from Noah, Cynthia's all caps, make sure she signs. The drafted emails written as if they were from me. The voicemail transcript. Cynthia admitting I was emotional and they could get her to sign. Seeing my humiliation turned into exhibit numbers made my hands tremble, but it also did something else. It gave the truth structure. It made it harder to twist. Evan's report followed, blunt and brutal. Undisclosed debt, a pattern of cash withdrawals, payments to a private membership club, and a consulting line that didn't match Noah's job. The timeline aligned too neatly with my father's decline to be coincidence. The motive wasn't emotional, it was financial desperation dressed up as family values. At the courthouse, the air smelled like sanitizer and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights made everyone look gray. Cynthia arrived dressed like a luncheon. Pearls, perfect hair, soft smile. She leaned toward the clerk with her practiced charm. "Sweetheart," she said, "there's been a misunderstanding." The clerk didn't even look up. "Ma'am, speak to your attorney." Cynthia blinked, genuinely shocked that being important in town didn't translate to being right on paper. Outside the elevator, Noah cornered me while Nina stepped away for a moment. He lowered his voice, urgent and controlled. "Just give them something," he whispered. "A small amount. It stops. My mom stops. Everyone stops. I stared at him, waiting for an apology that never came. His solution was still to trade me like currency. "You mean pay them to leave me alone," I said. "It's not like that," he muttered, eyes flicking away. But it was. It had always been. Nina returned, stepping between us like a door closing. She leaned in, voice calm enough to feel like armor. "If they keep pushing," she said, "we can request sanctions, and discovery will expose everything." Discovery. Depositions. Bank records. Emails. Questions they couldn't charm away. I looked at Noah's pale face and realized their greed had opened a door they couldn't close. Now I understand. Once the truth is filed, it doesn't care who you are. Discovery didn't feel like justice at first. It felt like paperwork pretending to be a weapon. Nina's office smelled like printer ink and peppermint tea. She slid a list across her desk. Financial disclosures, communications, bank statements, emails, texts, clinical words. But my skin prickled reading them because they meant Noah would have to answer on paper. He stalled anyway. Deadlines came and went with excuses from his attorney. Gathering records, technical delays, client availability. Noah had always been good at sounding reasonable while doing nothing. Now he was doing it in legal language. When the first batch finally arrived, it was thin. Too thin to contain a whole life. I opened it at my kitchen table, laptop glow washing the room in cold light. Evan was on speaker, voice calm and timeline-driven. "That's not everything," he said almost immediately. I scrolled. Accounts I recognized, balances that looked carefully tidy, a few credit lines. "It looks complete," I whispered, even as my stomach said it wasn't. Evan didn't hesitate. "It doesn't match what I traced. There are transfers showing on the bank statements that aren't reflected here, and these dates—" I heard his keyboard clicking. "They're curating, not disclosing. Curating. Like my life was a story they could edit." Nina filed the deficiency notice the same day. No emotion, no speeches, just paper forcing the truth closer. Then Cynthia made her mistake. She couldn't resist controlling the narrative. In the communications dump, Nina found a text thread and forwarded it to me. My hands went cold reading it. Cynthia, "Stick to the script." Cynthia, "Say she's grieving and confused." Cynthia, "Do not mention the withdrawals." Cynthia, "Stay calm. Let her look unstable." Talking points. Coaching. A plan to turn my pain into a diagnosis. That weekend, there was a community fundraiser. Soft lighting, champagne, catered food that smelled like garlic and sugar. Cynthia floated through the room like nothing was happening, hugging donors, laughing, collecting sympathy like it belonged to her. Near the dessert table, tiny cakes sat under warm lights, frosting glossy like it was trying to look innocent. Cynthia stepped close to me, still smiling for the crowd. Then she lowered her voice. "You'll be alone when this is over," she whispered. It wasn't rage, it was certainty, like isolation was her favorite weapon and she'd used it before. My chest tightened, but I didn't give her the reaction she wanted. I just looked at her until she turned away. Noah chose that night to humiliate me publicly. I heard his voice in a small group of people I'd known casually for years, soft, concerned, the tone of a man pretending to suffer. "She's mentally unstable from grief," he said. "I'm just trying to keep things calm." The words hit like cold water. I stood nearby holding a plate I couldn't taste, watching faces shift as people decided whether to believe him based on how pretty his lie sounded. The next day, Nina sent cease and desist letters to specific people spreading the defamatory claims. The gossip slowed the way it does when it risks costing someone money. That night, Evan called late. His voice was quiet, serious. "There's a second set of accounts Noah didn't disclose," he said. My stomach dropped, because hidden money usually meant hidden intent. The courtroom air felt dry, filtered through years of other people's fear. Everything echoed. Heels on tile, whispers, the hollow thump of a door closing down the hall. Fluorescent lights washed everyone out, even Cynthia with her perfect hair and pearls. I sat beside Nina at the counsel table with my hands folded so tightly my knuckles hurt. Across the aisle, Noah sat with his attorney, shoulders tight, eyes darting like he was still searching for a loophole. Cynthia sat behind him, posture rigid. Richard looked restless, like volume could still bully a room with rules. The judge entered and the room snapped to its feet. When we sat again, the silence felt heavy enough to press into my ears. The judge flipped through the file, pages turning slow and deliberate. Then she looked up. After reviewing the will, the trust instrument, and the evidence, she said, voice flat and clear, this court finds the no contest provision valid and enforceable. My stomach clenched. I forced myself to breathe. Noah's attorney stiffened. Cynthia's chin lifted as if entitlement alone could object. The judge continued, Mr. Hart's petition constitutes a contest under the terms of the clause. The penalty provision is triggered. Triggered. The word landed like a door slamming. The portion Noah had tried to reach didn't go to him. It redirected, exactly as my father wrote, into the charitable foundation in my father's name. Publicly filed, publicly visible. A record, not a rumor. Noah stared straight ahead, blinking too fast. Cynthia's mouth twitched, her smile unable to form. Richard's face reddened. Then the judge's gaze sharpened. I also have concerns regarding bad faith filings and incomplete disclosures. Sanctions are under consideration. Noah's attorney's expression flashed with anger, not at me, but at Noah, like he'd just realized how deep the lie went. Outside the courtroom, the hallway smelled like toner and stale coffee. Evan met us by the benches with a folder tucked under his arm, eyes calm but heavy. The undisclosed accounts tie to risky debts, he said quietly, and there are patterns consistent with possible misuse of employer funds. Subpoenas are starting. Subpoenas. The word didn't care how charming Noah sounded at dinners. In the weeks that followed, Cynthia's circle fractured. Donors stepped back. Board members suddenly took a leave. The women who once praised her stopped returning calls, not out of morality, out of fear of being near a sinking ship. Richard tried one last intimidation outside the courthouse doors, voice rising. Nina stepped in, calm as a wall. Continued harassment can become criminal, she said. Stop. Richard's voice went smaller when he realized cameras and paperwork beat volume. Noah was forced into terms that protected me and the trust. He lost access to the lifestyle his family used as a stage, and the people who cheered him most stopped showing up. Then one night my phone rang. Noah's voice was raw, stripped of polish. Tell them to stop, he whispered. I'll do anything. I closed my eyes and understood something clean and final. My last move wasn't revenge. Now I understand. It was freedom. The mediation room smelled like burnt coffee and copier paper, the kind of stale office air that clung to your clothes. The table was laminated wood with tiny scratches, and the chairs were the kind that made your back ache on purpose, as if discomfort would pressure people into agreeing faster. Outside the narrow window, the sky was flat and gray, and everything about the building felt designed to be neutral. No warmth, no softness, no hiding. Noah sat across from me with his hands folded, wearing the expression he used in public when he wanted to look reasonable. Clean haircut, pressed shirt, calm mouth, the version of him that strangers trusted. Cynthia sat beside him, clutching a tissue like a prop. Richard hovered a seat away, restless and angry in his posture. Nina sat to my left, a quiet wall in a blazer, a folder open in front of her like a shield. The mediator spoke in that gentle, practiced tone. We're here to reach an amicable resolution. Amicable. Like we were ending a book club, not a marriage. Noah cleared his throat and leaned forward slightly, as if he was offering something noble. I want peace, he said. I don't want this to drag on. He glanced at me, eyes softening in a way that used to work on me. We can stop all of this, he added. We can move forward. My stomach tightened. There was always a price hidden in Noah's kindness. He slid a paper across the table, his proposal, then said the part he wanted to sound like generosity. "I'm willing to walk away without making things ugly," he said, if you share access, something fair, just enough so everyone can feel secure. Share access, not share memories, not share grief, share access." He said it like it was the same as peace, like handing over a key was the same as healing. Nina didn't blink. She didn't even look at me for permission. She took the paper, scanned it once, and slid it back like it was contaminated. "No," she said calmly. Noah's smile faltered. "I'm trying to be reasonable." "You are trying to obtain trust access you are not entitled to," Nina replied, voice even. "We're here to finalize divorce terms, not to renegotiate your father-in-law's estate plan." Cynthia let out a soft, dramatic sound and dabbed at her eyes. "This is so sad," she whispered, shoulders shaking as if she was the grieving one. "We loved you like a daughter." I watched the performance without reacting. The tears looked practiced, appearing and disappearing on command. When crying didn't shift the room, Cynthia's face hardened, the tissue crumpling in her hand. "So this is who you are," she snapped, voice sharp now. "Cold, greedy. You really are exactly what we said." Then, as if she remembered she had an audience, she pressed her palms together and tilted her head. "Lord, soften her heart," she murmured, loud enough for the mediator to hear. Crying, rage, prayer. Each version just a different costume for the same need: control. Noah turned his attention to me, and I felt the bait coming like a hook in dark water. His voice lowered, intimate and cutting. "You're selfish," he said. "Do you know that? You're ungrateful. My parents tried to help you, and you turned this into a war." I stared at the table, at the tiny scratches in the laminate, at the way my hands stayed folded in front of me. My fingers didn't shake the way they used to. I could feel my heartbeat, but it wasn't panicked. It was steady. Noah kept going, trying to find the word that would make me snap. "Heartless," he added. "You don't even care what this does to me." I knew what he wanted. He wanted me to break, to raise my voice, to cry, to give him something he could point to and say, "See? She's unstable. She's the problem." So I didn't give it to him. I stayed quiet, hands folded, letting Nina speak. My silence wasn't submission anymore. It was discipline. Nina slid our terms forward with the calm of someone closing a door. "The trust remains separate property outside marital claims," she said. "All communication will go through counsel. There will be no contact outside agreed channels. Any harassment triggers immediate enforcement, including fees and additional protective measures. Rules with teeth." I watched Noah's jaw tighten as he scanned the pages. I watched Cynthia's eyes flick over the words like she was looking for loopholes, for wiggle room, for any place she could wedge her will back into my life. "There are consequences," Cynthia whispered, offended. "For speaking." "For harassment," Nina corrected, not raising her voice. "For defamation. For attempts to pressure or intimidate. Boundaries are enforceable." The mediator nodded slowly, as if relieved the room had something solid to hold on to. Noah tried one last time, voice softer, almost pleading. "Just give us something, and this all goes away." Nina didn't look up. "No," she said again, the same calm word, the same closed door. Eventually, the papers were signed where they needed to be signed, not by me giving access, by me taking it back. When we stood to leave, my legs felt strangely light, like I'd been carrying a weight for years and had finally set it down. The hallway outside smelled like industrial carpet and cold air. The exit sign glowed red above the door like a quiet promise. Cynthia followed us into the corridor, her heels clicking fast, sharp, angry. She stopped a few feet in front of me, eyes bright with the kind of fury that couldn't find a target anymore. "You'll regret this when no one wants you," she said, voice low and venomous. For years, that line would have pierced me. I would have heard it at night. I would have wondered if she was right. This time, I didn't flinch. I looked at her, really looked, at the pearls, the perfect hair, the fear underneath her cruelty, and I finally understood what her approval was worth. Nothing. Today I know dignity is not something you beg for. It's something you keep, clean, quiet, and fully your own. The first time my apartment felt quiet in a good way, it startled me. Not the tense quiet of waiting for the next argument. Not the heavy quiet where you can hear your own thoughts turning on you. This quiet was clean, broken only by the soft whir of my laptop fan, the distant traffic outside, and the occasional click of my stapler as I tried to make sense of the paper trail that had once tried to swallow me. I didn't move into anything fancy, just a small place with plain walls and sunlight that actually reached the floor in the mornings. The air smelled like fresh paint for the first week, then slowly turned into mine. Laundry detergent, coffee, the faint citrus of dish soap. No Cynthia perfume, no Noah cologne, no candle scent trying to cover a lie. On my second day there, I opened a storage box and dumped every document onto the kitchen table. It made a sound like a wave, paper sliding and slapping against wood. Envelopes, copies, filings, bank statements, court notices, trust instruments, evidence of a war I never asked for but finished anyway. I stared at the mess, and for a moment my chest tightened. The old me would have shut the box and pretended it didn't exist. The old me would have tried to be normal, tried to prove I wasn't bitter, tried to prove I was still the easy wife, the reasonable one, the woman who could be talked over without consequence. Instead, I breathed in, slow, and started building order. 4 folders, thick, simple, labeled in black marker, trust, court, credit, future. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't poetic, but something about those 4 words made my shoulders drop. Peace, I learned, wasn't a mood. It was structure. It was knowing where things lived, knowing what was mine, knowing what could no longer be taken. I scanned everything into a password-protected drive, then filed hard copies the way Nina taught me. Chronological, clean, no gaps. When I finished, I sat back and listened to the quiet again. My hands were steady. A week later, I met with Mr. Hale to finalize the first set of distributions from the trust. His office still smelled like old paper and calm. He spoke in the same measured tone, but this time I didn't feel small in his chair. I felt anchored. "We can begin funding the foundation according to your father's instructions," he said. Hearing it out loud made my throat tighten. My father's name, attached to something that would keep moving forward. I didn't fund his charity initiative as a punishment, not as a victory lap, not as a way to rub it in Cynthia's face. I funded it like a continuation, like finishing a sentence my father started. The first donation went to a local program that helped families with medical bills, the kind of quiet crisis most people don't see until it's theirs. I remembered the hospital hallway, the way my father's breathing sounded like paper tearing, and I felt a strange warmth in my chest. Not satisfaction, not revenge, purpose. Their greed had tried to turn my father into an asset. Instead, his name became help. The gold digger story didn't die in one dramatic moment. It died slowly, which was almost better. It died in grocery store aisles when people stopped looking at my ring and started looking away out of embarrassment. It died when Paige's vague posts stopped getting reactions because there was no new outrage to feed on. It died when Cynthia's friends, who once treated her like royalty, quietly distanced themselves from anything that smelled like court filings and subpoenas. I didn't argue online. I didn't write long captions. I didn't defend myself to people who didn't deserve my breath. I just kept living in a way that was consistent. Facts have a strange power. They get boring, and boring is deadly to rumors. Noah's family stopped calling when they realized there was nothing left to extract. At first, there were a few attempts, numbers I didn't recognize, voicemails that sounded concerned, messages that tried to soften the past. "We just want to make sure you're okay. We hate how things ended. Can we talk like adults?" But the tone always had that same hunger underneath it, that same invisible hand reaching toward what wasn't theirs. When I didn't respond, the calls faded. Their love had always been conditional, and conditions don't survive boundaries. Sometimes, late at night, I still heard Cynthia's voice in my head. Gold digger, like an old bruise you press without meaning to. The word would float up when I was tired, when bills piled up, when loneliness hit in that quiet hour before sleep. But now, when it happened, I didn't spiral. I didn't scramble to prove anything. I breathed. I looked at my folders. Trust, court, credit, future, lined up neatly in a drawer like a quiet promise. I looked at the foundation paperwork with my father's name on it, not as a trophy, but as a continuation of who he was. I looked at the life I rebuilt with my own hands. Today I know dignity isn't passive, it's deliberate. Now I understand my father didn't just leave me money, he left me a way out. And when that old word tries to crawl back in, gold digger, I remember the truth that finally set me free. I didn't dig for gold. I dug myself out.